where do you think some of the biggest name free agents? We've been kind of crapping on this free agent class generally, but some guys have been cut. There's more names to this free agent pool. We may have more movement in terms of, Darius Slay or whatever. There might be more names getting added to it before we get there. But let's sort of start looking at the biggest marquee names that are out there now and where we think they may end up signing.
I think one that makes a ton of sense is Mike McGlinchey going to the Chicago Bears. They need a right tackle. As bad as their roster was, may have been the worst position on the team. The interior defensive line was not good either, so maybe they look into the Javon Hargrave and Draymond Jones markets. But I think for them, a priority is bringing in an outside zone tackle, and Mike McGlinchey, it'd be their fifth Notre Dame player, I think. I think it makes a lot of sense.
And a guy that, stylistically fits their offensive line as well. He's an upgrade, just period. That's an important thing. Getting better along that offensive line is good for them. But stylistically, Mike McGlinchey is, I think, more of a run-blocking player than he is a pass-blocking player compared with, say, Juwan Taylor is another right tackle, similar sort of age, similar experience, but is very much focused as a pass-blocking guy first. Run-blocking is nowhere near the same caliber. For Chicago's offensive line, given the style of offense, they're going to still have to run with Justin Fields at quarterback. Bringing in a guy who is, better as a run blocker than a pass blocker is probably a good thing for them.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a ton of sense. Like you said, Taylor actually is 3 years younger than McGarry and McGlinchey, which I think is interesting. But yes, a very different, fit in different teams. Not a good athlete getting to the second level in space. I think they're going to come down to McGlinchey or McGarry if they do make that splash at right tackle.
I mean, we've been joking that Mike McGlinchey was like a 10-year grizzled veteran when he entered the league just based off the look of him. So it makes sense that he's significantly older than Juwan Taylor. Okay, who else we got going somewhere?
I think Tremaine Edmonds, the linebacker for the Buffalo Bills, I like the fit with the Houston Texans. DeMeco Ryans comes over, bringing that 4-3 defense. They obviously, the Niners spend more resources at linebacker than any other team with Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner. And look, you have Christian Kirksey. You have some young guys there. I'm blanking on his name. Christian Harris, the linebacker from, I think, Alabama. But if you want to bring in like a marquee, big blue chip guy, I know he wore the green dot in Buffalo, got everyone lined up, did a lot of things. The league is very, very high on him. He's going to sign a very, very big contract. And I love his fit with the Houston Texans.
You think that DeMeco Ryans kind of sees him as their Fred Warner, Fred Warner in that defense in San Francisco. Obviously, the defense around him was really good, but Fred Warner's ability to do freaky things within that defense lets them do a lot. There's that obvious play in the playoffs where he ends up running down the seam with a slot receiver and gets it done. There are a very small number of linebackers in the NFL that have any hope of executing that assignment, and the 49ers would do stuff like that to Fred Warner all the time. I don't think Tremaine Edmonds has been anything like the player that Fred Warner has been in the NFL, but he has those abilities. He's got the speed, the athleticism, the size, the capacity. He fits the mold to do that kind of stuff. Do you think DeMeco Ryans looks at this guy and goes, he can be our Fred Warner in this defense?
I do. And so I had a couple conversations with people in Indianapolis talking about Edmonds. And, you hear a lot, I get asked a lot about guys in contract years. And can it be a red flag? Deron Payne was another one. And for Edmonds, I heard some people say, we think he just figured out more what he's supposed to do, what his assignment is. The game just slowed down for him. It wasn't, we already know he's a freakish athlete, truly tested off the charts. He's going to be 25 years old for the entire 2023 season. His sixth NFL season, he'll be 25 the entire time, which is crazy. But nuts. I do. Like I said, I think Fred Warner is kind of in a category of his own right now. Edmonds has the physical tools to do that. If he then also has the play recognition and instincts to then, the Warner play you mentioned, yes, he made an acrobatic and phenomenal running up the middle of the field, but he also knew where it was going before they even snapped the ball. So both of those combined, if you get that from Edmonds, he could, in theory, become a level, that level of player.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting debate. When a guy has a career year at the end of his rookie season, specifically, or rookie contract specifically, that's where it becomes a really difficult debate between, was that, just playing for the second contract, the money, or is that how long it took a young player to work out how to play at the NFL level? It's kind of in line roughly with how long some positions take to work it out anyway, right? The sort of 3-year jump that people expect to see or are accustomed to thinking of. So you only have to add 1 or 2 more years to that, depending on where he was drafted, before it makes perfect sense. And you're sort of scared on the one hand of the guy who's having a giant jump forward of a contract year to get the big money deal. On the other hand, it does sort of tally with how long young players might take to work out how to be themselves at the NFL level.
At that position, we've seen the learning curve be quite steep at off-ball linebacker, especially in today's NFL with more too high shells. There's so much stress on that position. They have to still fit the run. They have more coverage responsibilities. There's so much going on that we've seen that. Like a lot of guys take a couple years to adjust, and then they play some better football. So it might depend position to position how you view that. A running back should, in theory, come in and be good right away. If anything, be better the earlier he is. It's an interesting situation, interesting debate, but I think in his case, people view it as, look, he's super young. He, didn't like at Virginia Tech, if I remember correctly, like they kind of used him a lot of different ways. He came forward a little bit. He did a lot of different things. But I think the game is slowing down finally now for him.
All right. Who else have we got in terms of potential big name landing spots?
I'll do one more off-ball linebacker. I think it's Bobby Okereke going to the Carolina Panthers. Scott Fitterer, the general manager at his podium, mentioned wanting to add speed at off-ball linebacker multiple times. You don't get a lot out of these things, but he said it twice, and you could tell it was a very, very genuine and serious comment. They already cut Damian Wilson. I think it's possible they also move on from Shaq Thompson. And in that scenario, they have, pretty much no one at off-ball linebacker. And I think Okereke brings that speed, undersized guy, solid coverage player, but a good sideline-to-sideline guy. You see the run defense and defensive stop numbers there. That's because he can, move pretty quickly from sideline to sideline. So I love that fit as well, especially if they do cut Shaq Thompson. I think he could be a Carolina Panther.
Look, you put some respect on Frankie Louvu's name right there.
Oh, you're right. My bad. No, you're right.
Let me throw one at you just as an off the cuff thing, because Javon Hargrave, I think, is essentially the prize of this free agent class and has been all the way along. Where do we think he ends up going?
I could see you're starting to get rumblings now that Cleveland maybe just takes a swing on him. They obviously have nothing at interior, and that I'm confidently saying they have nothing at interior defensive line. I'm not forgetting any names there.
Good. You're fine.
So maybe there, Chicago, I think, will be in the mix as well. But we already gave the Bears Mike McGlinchey, so let's go Cleveland Browns, making a massive addition along the interior.
That would be huge for Cleveland. I do think it makes a lot of sense for Chicago as well, particularly if they think they can come out of this draft with Will Anderson, the edge rusher from Alabama. All of a sudden, you get the best free agent available and the best defensive player potentially available. If we put an asterisk next to Jalen Carter with his legal problems, I mean, that would be huge for Chicago to be able to not just attack the defensive line generally, but potentially add the two best players available in the offseason to that defensive line in a month's period. That would be pretty impressive.
They had the worst defensive line in the NFL last year, and frankly, maybe one of the worst defensive lines of the last several years. I mean, just devoid of talent. So, it would go a long way. They
had by far the worst pressure rate in the NFL as a defense last season. And they were so I had this graph that I would repopulate every week, sort of 4 quadrants, how much they blitz rate versus pressure rate. And they were bottom left in the crappy quadrant by a mile the entire time, and way off the deep end of anybody else. Atlanta was the next closest one, and they had a pretty wretched pass rush themselves, but the Bears defensive line was just bringing nothing to the table the entire year.